Welcome everyone, I'm the Buddy Counter, and for today I'll be covering future live service content for Battlefield 5, more specifically, the weapons we could expect to see. Not long ago, we got a massive info drop covering all the weapons, vehicles, gadgets and reinforcements we can see at launch, so this really helps us to get a better gauge of what weapons we could expect during the live service. I have many weapon ideas, so I'll be making these videos into a mini-series and separating them by weapon category. For this episode, I'll be discussing submachine guns. So far, the SMGs that have already been confirmed are the Thompson 1928, the Suomi KP31, MP28, MP34, MP40, EMP, and the Sten. So, without any more delay, let's get started. The Deneuve Er 43M, a Hungarian SMG, but extra thick. This firearm could easily be mistaken for a carbine. The 43M could use 20 to 40 round magazines, and had a unique mechanism in which the user could fold the magazine into the foregrip, making it easier to transport. Due to the weight, it was easy to control and could fire at around 750 rounds per minute, while also having a higher velocity caliber than most SMGs. The way I see it, having an awkward reload, much like it did in real life, and a slower ADS time would work well in balancing the gun. A neat little animation they could add is the player folding the magazine out of the foregrip when they first spawn in with it. The Lanchester Mk1. If the Hellriegel was in Battlefield 5, it would be the Lanchester. This submachine gun was a reverse-engineered German MP28, which would eventually serve with the British Royal Navy. Having a fire rate of 600 rounds per minute and using 32 round Sten magazines, or 50 round Lanchester magazines, it was claimed to be very controllable. So to balance this SMG in-game, the reload would be a bit more sluggish than the Sten reload, to make up for its 50 round capacity, and its hipfire a bit more erratic. Also worth noting, it could fix a Lee Enfield bayonet, because sailors weren't exposed to enough salt already. The Zed K38, a Czechoslovakian SMG that was so impressive that the Germans continued to produce it after Czechia was occupied by Nazi Germany. It seemed to bridge the gap between a light support weapon and an SMG, as it came equipped with an integral folding bipod and a quick change barrel, features you wouldn't normally see in an SMG, and it would see the most use with the SS and other allies of Germany. Having a cyclic rate of 450 to 750 rounds per minute, it was very easy to control and can hold 30 rounds. If you ask me how to balance it, I wouldn't sugarcoat it, because this gun is perfect. It's essentially a Czech version of the Ruby Rolls carbine. The Olin Gun, a completely Australian engineered submachine gun, hailed as a very reliable weapon in the Pacific Theatre amongst the Anzac and British users. Utilising a top-mounted magazine, it fed 33 rounds and could fire at 700 rounds per minute, essentially making the Owen a slower firing but higher capacity automatico. In BF5, the Olin gun would have an average ADS recoil pattern and would also be somewhat reliant on its hipfire, as the overhead magazine would put most players at a disadvantage, also having a quick damage drop-off to avoid overly long-range kills. The PPSH-41, the weapon most people were itching for me to mention. It's not like it's an overrated copy of the Suomi at all. This iconic Russian SMG would see service after the initial German invasion of the Soviet Union, and would become a pivotal firearm in the Russian army. In-game, I'd expect nothing more than a slightly higher RPM than the Suomi, and a harder to control recoil, not to mention a higher minimum capacity magazine. If the BF5 weapon upgrades stay the same as they were in the beta, may Lord have mercy on us for the decked out PPSH spam we'll witness. The Beretta Model 38A, the standard issue submachine gun of the Italian army, often making the MP40 look bad, which was saying something when it was the Italians who were originally wielding these weapons. This Beretta could hold a wide array of ammo capacities, from 10, 20, 30 to 40 rounds. Having a nice fire rate of 600 RPM, the weight in combination of the weapon's compensator made recoil almost non-existent for even the newest users. But this weight would also work as a good balance for the weapon, meaning its ADS time would be a bit slower than most other SMGs. Another tweak would be a quicker damage drop-off at range to counteract its laser beam-like control. The Masse 38. A compact French SMG which wasn't too complicated in design, the Masse 38 fired a special 7.65mm long round, which was weaker than most other SMG calibers at the time. The round was smaller and weaker, but was lighter, enabling soldiers to carry more of the ammunition. Using 32 round magazines and firing at a high rate of 700 rounds per minute, this firearm in-game would require an extra bullet than most SMGs to kill due to the weak caliber, but had no problem in managing recoil. Hipfire would be average at best, and the sights would actually be offset to the left, almost reminiscent of the Shosho from Battlefield 1. The Type 144. Japan's uncommon SMG during the conflict, production of this small arm was only buffed until 1943 when Japan's industrial capacity and grip in the war was already weak. Only 25 to 27,000 were ever produced as two variants, the Type 140s and Type 144s. The major difference being that the 44 fired at 800 RPM while the 40 at around 450 RPM. This submachine gun would fire the outdated 8x22mm Nambu from a 30-round curved, side-mounted magazine, while having an erratic recoil but a decent hipfire. The caliber would require more time to kill, but the fire rate makes up for this. And what is the Japanese firearm without its trusty bayonet? The M3 Grease Gun. The United States attempt to replace the Thompson with a gun that only a car mechanic would love. The Grease Gun bore the name from its appearance to a mechanic's tool and was incredibly easy and cheap to produce. Using the same caliber as the Thompson, it had the same damage output but a very controllable fire rate of 450 rounds per minute. This compact weapon would essentially work as a long-range alternative to the Thompson while still retaining the same stopping power of the 45 ACP round. The Sterling, an SMG which would later be adapted into the E11 blaster in the Star Wars universe. The Sterling was a replacement for the Sten SMG, but wouldn't see much large-scale production until after the war. In saying this, it was briefly used during the Allied invasion of France, Germany, and the Benelux region, primarily by special forces. When it comes to stats, the Sten and the Sterling are fairly similar, a few minor differences being that the Sterling holds 2 more rounds, fires an extra 10 to 20 rounds faster, and would have a longer damage drop-off. To counter this, a slightly worse hipfire would be an acceptable compromise and a slightly longer reload. The Areata M1941, a more obscure submachine gun developed and produced by Romania. This SMG was employed amongst the Romanian army by 1943 and saw its share of combat against the Soviet advance against the Axis. Prior to the adoption of the weapon, Romania was using German and Italian submachine guns, so the country was set on creating a native design. The Areata fired a 9mm cartridge at a fire rate of 600 rounds per minute while feeding from 32-round stick magazines. When compared to the MP40, the Areata would have a further damage drop-off and would surpass it in close quarters, but would have less control both in terms of hipfire and aiming down sights. The Nambu Model 1. As if the previous Japanese submachine gun was rare enough to encounter, this one tops the cake. The Nambu 1 was a presumably slow-firing experimental SMG, which was never truly adopted or produced in any massive number. It did have a small presence during the Second Sino-Japanese War in 1937 amongst the Japanese Marines and some other infantry units, hinting to their appearance in the Battle of Shanghai. Firing at a sluggish 400 to 450 rounds per minute, it made up for its slow fire rate by having a large 50-round curved magazine, and due to ergonomic complexity, the aiming down sights recoil would be hard to control, with hipfire being this little beast's strong suit. The TZ-45, a last-ditch firearm created by the Italians that didn't switch side. This compact submachine gun was rushed into production for the Italian Socialist Republic soldiers in North Italy following the Allied invasion of Sicily and mainland Italy. Having a crude appearance, it was renowned for its innovative double safety mechanism which would be introduced to many post-war firearm designs. Firing at a high 800 rounds per minute and using 40-round stick magazines, it would seem like a better alternative to the Owen if not for its even more berserk ADS recoil and a short damage drop-off range. The Lightning SMG. Translated to Lightning, the original name for this gun is impossible for me to pronounce without butchering the Polish pronunciation. It was one of the most produced SMGs in all of occupied Europe, designed by the Polish underground state. The Lightning saw its share of guerrilla fighting in sieges within Poland, but the most notable engagement these weapons would be used in was the Warsaw Uprising. Not much would be different between this gun and the Sten, besides having a slightly higher fire rate of 600 rounds per minute. To me, it would more so just be an aesthetically different gun to the Sten, and a nod to the Polish war effort under German rule. And that's it for my list, and I hope you enjoyed the ideas I mentioned. Feel free to comment down below what you think, or if there's any SMG I didn't cover that you'd want to see. If you enjoyed, feel free to drop a like to show your support, join my Discord in the description to share in the memes and discussion, subscribe to keep up to date, and as always, keep on fighting.